up to run the bus. You don't pay me enough to put my life in danger. I'm not doing it. They showed up. They showed up. I just finished communicating how dangerous this was to convince 19 million people to stay home and close schools and close businesses, and the essential workers still showed up. That is a value. They didn't show up for a paycheck. They didn't show up because government asked them to show up. They didn't show up because their employer said, I need you to show up. They showed up out of their values and out of their honor and out of their dignity. That's why they showed up. My grandfather, people know my father in this state, my grandfather, little Italian immigrant, Andrea Cuomo, named for him, no education, ditch digger, came here, the classic immigrant story, winds up having a little grocery store in South Jamaica, Queens, poor community. And during the Depression, he almost lost the store, and he loved to tell the story. Why did he almost lose the store? Well, it was the Depression and the finances. No, because he gave away food during the Depression, because he wouldn't let anyone be hungry. So a family would come in, nobody had money, it was the Depression, and he would give them food. And he was giving away so much food that he had problems paying his bills. Gave him a lot of stress, wound up having a heart attack as a young person. But no one told him to do that. That was just his values. And I would ask him about it afterwards. I said, Grandpa, why would you? He said, what am I going to do, let them go hungry? I'm going to let somebody go hungry? That was unimaginable to him. He was an essential worker. Nobody called him an essential worker, but he was an essential worker. And that's what people are doing day in and day out here. The person who delivers the groceries, the person who's driving the bus, the person who's driving the subway, the nurses, the doctors, the orderlies, all these people who are showing up every day. Not because of the check. They could stay home too and file for unemployment. No, they're doing it out of their sense of honor and their sense of dignity and their sense of pride. This is their mission. This is their role. They're New Yorkers. They're Americans, and they're going to show up. The police officers, the firefighters. I mean, everyone's petrified. You're going to be a police officer? You're going to pull people over in a car? You're going to go into a house for a domestic disturbance? Wrestle with somebody in the house? You don't know who it is? That's what they do. That's their job. That's why I wanted to thank the healthcare workers. And everybody thanks the healthcare workers, but it's not just the healthcare workers. It's all the people who've been out there all this time, making sure everyone else could stay home. They have higher infection rates. They're getting paid a minimal amount of money. They have families at home too that are suffering, but they're getting up every day and they're doing their job. So as we talk about reopening, protect and respect the essential workers. They need testing. They need equipment. They're putting their lives on the line. Protect and respect the essential workers. Public transportation, we've kept running because they need it to get to work. That's why public transportation continued. We talked early on about closing down public transportation. They said, forget it. That's how the nurses are getting to work. That's how the orderlies are getting to work. Nobody will be in a hospital. Nobody will be there to deliver the food. Nobody will be in the power plant to keep the lights on. Nobody will be at the telecommunications department. Public transportation is vital for them. Well, then make sure public transportation is safe and disinfected. The New York Daily News ran a story today on the public transportation in New York City. And Their front page is a picture of a subway car filled with homeless people and their belongings. Respect the essential workers. That is disgusting, what is happening on those subway cars. It's disrespectful to the essential workers who need to ride the subway system. Upstate New York need to ride the buses to get to work. They deserve better, and they will have better. We have to have a public transportation system that is clean, where the trains are disinfected. You have homeless people on trains. It's not even safe for the homeless people to be on trains. No face masks. You have this whole outbreak. We're concerned about homeless people, so we let them stay on the trains without protection in this epidemic of the COVID virus? No, we have to do better than that, and we will. And we will learn from this, and we'll be better from this, because we are New York tough. And tough means not just tough, because tough is easy. It's smart, and it's disciplined, and it's unified, and it's loving. And that's who we are, and that's what we are. And that's why we got through this as well as we have thus far together, because of our values, because of our respect, our dignity, our mutuality, our love for one another, our willing to sacrifice, and because we're fortunate where we have many, many heroes in our midst, not because they have medals on their uniforms, but because they have honor in their souls, and they have strength in their character, and they have dignity and pride in themselves, and because they show up every day, to make sure everyone is protected. And they have to be at the top of the list. They're going to be at the top of the list in the next iteration of whatever this is. They're going to be at the top of the list at the Golden Gate. But they deserve our respect and protection here, and they're going to get it. Questions?
Governor, Michael Benny from CNY Central. This week you introduced a lot of folks to the concept of an attractive nuisance. And in Central New York, we have the Syracuse Nationals Car Show, which I know you're a fan. The State Fair, last time around, drew 1.3 million people. Our lakeside towns, when you think about summer, Central New York in the summer, in my estimation, is an attractive nuisance. How can these things go on?
Yeah. It breaks my heart, but they can't, unless it's done statewide, and unless it's done not just statewide, but with our neighboring states. We had a situation in Connecticut where they had certain things open that we didn't have open. They had waterside parks, just what you mentioned. And Connecticut called and said, I have all New York license plates in my parking lot. People will get in the car and drive several hours to go somewhere. Look, if you opened the State Fair this year, you'd have the highest attendance we ever had. That I can guarantee you. But it wouldn't be good. Everything is about reducing density. So it would have to be statewide. Parks, beaches, waterside attractions, that would have to be statewide, or whatever region did it without the others, you would have a massive infusion of people from everywhere. And that's then density, and density is the problem.
So that's a no.
That is a no, unless it was done statewide in collaboration with the other neighboring states, right? We do almost everything together with Connecticut and New Jersey, or at least we know what they're doing and the consequences of what they're doing. But can you open the state fair unless the entire state is at a point where it's opened? I don't believe so.
Governor, the unemployment system is still a mess in New York. Hundreds of thousands of people applied 4, 5, 6 weeks ago for money, have not received anything. I know you keep saying they'll get their money, it'll come when it comes, but a lot of these people live paycheck to paycheck. they've gone weeks without money. What more can you do to try and help them?
Look, it's something we work at every day. It's not a New York problem. It's a nationwide problem. The number of unemployed hit an all-time high. They all called the local unemployment office in the state. Every state is dealing with this. I talked to the governors on joint conference calls. Every state is overwhelmed and trying to design new technology and new apps and new this. Our state actually is doing much, much better than the other states in how many people haven't been able to sign up. We have over 1,000 people working on phones and technology. It's even more now, right?
3,000 now.
3,000 people hired just to man phones and the website, et cetera. So we have the number down dramatically, but it was just a sheer function of quantity and volume. Now, good news, bad news. Yes, it's frustrating as heck. Good news is the check, it doesn't cost you any money. You will get the check for the same period of time. But your point is right. You are without that check until you get signed up. But the numbers are way down. Melissa, do you remember the...
So right now, we've paid out $3.1 billion to over 1.5 million people, and as the governor said, we're heads and shoulders above all the other states who are dealing with this crisis. The problem is that as we get the backlog down in the previous weeks, that continues to build. You know, we're still getting claims in real time. Right now, we're down to around 400,000 outstanding claims. The majority of those are the pandemic unemployment insurance, the self-contractors, the gig employees, people who are out of work because their kids' schools are closed, which is something that the state has never dealt with before. That was new as a result of the CARES Act that was done at the end of March. And so the Department of Labor, as the governor said, we now have 3,000 people that are working on this issue, and they're going to keep working at it till everybody gets their money. The one thing I will say is the governor did an executive order that said that you can't be evicted for the 90 days, and obviously that's something that will extend going forward if that's necessary. So while folks are waiting to get this processed and while we get through this, at least they know they can't be evicted from their homes, and they will get the back pay back to the first day that they were due it. And we understand and we sympathize, and we're asking people to please remain patient, and we're doing everything we can to resolve the problem.
You were asked about the exposure for some of those folks yesterday, and you said you believed it was 3 dozen or so. I spoke to 3 dozen families myself, just me, that had someone else's information in the mail, their social security numbers, their phone number, where they worked, all their financial information. So you had a chance to re-examine that exposure?
So that's what we were aware of as of yesterday morning. We did a further investigation. It appears there was one mailing that was the problem, where literally 2 pieces of paper, when they were printed and collated, were stuck together, and then that caused the whole mailing to be off. And so we haven't identified the specific number. They're looking at that right now, but out of an abundance of caution, everyone whose forms were printed and mailed that day are going to receive free credit monitoring for an entire year, and they're having their claims prioritized. So they are working on that. As of yesterday morning, that was the number. We fear that number is higher, but we have isolated the one mailing that it was impacted from. I can get that information too. It was the end of last week.
Sure.
Today, all of the points that you made today seem to be very similar to the points that were made in yesterday's briefing. Are we as a region CNY now having permission to reopen after May 15th?
Today what we did, I gave concepts more yesterday. Today I actually gave the numbers and the data, the actual steps to a reopening plan. We said that we'll look at regions. May 15th, state goes on pause. We are on pause, on pause. That's about 2 weeks. The CDC guideline says declining cases for the preceding 2 weeks. So if we see the cases continuing to go down, we get to November 15th, we'll have met CDC guidelines in some parts of the state, not New York City, not downstate. Unless a miracle happens, please, please. But, so then you'd have regions which would meet the CDC guidelines, like some of the other states have met CDC guidelines. They could then plan a reopening. The question will be, what is a reopening plan, right? Everybody's talking about reopening. I'm going to have a reopening plan. What is a reopening plan? There was no such thing as a reopening plan. Nobody's done it before. So we went back, we studied every reopening plan, spoke to every international expert who went through this epidemic wave, second wave, flu season, and actually came up with 12 steps which are a reopening plan with metrics, with data. Here are the numbers, and this is what has to be in place to reopen. And regions that in 2 weeks have reduced rates by the CDC guidelines, these would be the reopening plans that we have to have in place. They're regional, which means those counties would have to coordinate on the county responsibilities. The state has to coordinate certain responsibilities. The federal government has responsibilities here. They're providing supplies for the testing because the testing has been a big problem. So this is the probably most specific reopening plan with data that I have seen, and I've went through many of these, but it's a very fact-based, data-driven reopening plan for regions that would keep them safe and allow the economy to reopen in phases.
Yesterday, the president apparently had a phone conversation with several governors around the country, and he said, quote, states should seriously consider reopening their schools before the academic year is over. What is your stance on that? Also, were you on that call?
I was on that call. He's talking to states. When you talk to the governors, you have 50 governors, you have 50 different situations, right? You have some states that have a de minimis problem, and then you have me on the phone who has the worst problem in the country. So some states are reopening. If a state is reopening, then it would make sense for some states to reopen schools. I don't know how you really reopen businesses statewide without reopening schools, right? Because schools, primarily, they educate our children. As a practical matter, many people go to work because their kids are in school. If the kids are not in school, now you have a child care issue. So for those states, that makes sense. We're going to have a decision on schools. We have all schools in the state closed. We'll have a decision at the end of this week what we're going to do on schools and then on summer schools.
Governor, on a related note, this hospital sits across the street from Syracuse University. Students